Hi, I'm Carol Beavis, and I teach at kindergarten at Hand in Hand Primary School in Thomasville, Georgia. The purpose of this presentation is to allow you to become familiar with the data collected from GKids in math and language arts. Then I want to show you how Hand in Hand compared with students from around the state. This data was collected for the purpose of helping students achieve in areas that they needed strengthening and identifying our school's weaknesses. This will help the staff make changes in instruction that can improve student learning. The following charts are visuals to help you compare hand-in-hand students with those from around the state. First, I wanted to know how hand-in-hand students performed in language arts compared to those of the state. This graph compares hand-in-hand in the state for 3 years. As you can see in the language arts, the state in 2012, more students were meeting or exceeding the standards than hand-in-hand. However, in 2013 and 14, hand-in-hand students were outperforming the state with 81% of the students meeting or exceeding the standards as compared to the state's 77.2. This graph is comparing the students at hand-in-hand with the state in math. The school has not performed as well in math as they did language arts. However, in 2014, they did outperform the state by a half a percentage point. Going back to the language arts and breaking it down into the standards, you can see that hand-in-hand has outperformed the state in the 2013-14 school year. In reading, the 81.6% of the students at hand-in-hand met or exceeded more than the state did at 79.4. Additionally, you can see in writing, speaking and listening, and in language that the students at hand-in-hand scored higher than those at the state. Now looking at the math standards by standard, you can see that hand-in-hand outperformed the state except in counting and cardinality. We had 90.2% of the students meeting or exceeding the standard of measurement in data and 87.1% of the students in geometry. That must have been because of all those blocks we gave them to play with. However, the students at hand-in-hand did not score as well in numbers and operation and base 10, and this is an area that probably needs to be addressed. Drilling down further, I needed to see how hand-in-hand students performed on each of the language standards so as better to address particular weaknesses. This graph shows just the percentage of students at hand-in-hand who met or exceeded the language standards over the last 3 years. This graph shows over a 3-year period the students have made some gains in reading and writing. However, speaking and language have seen scores decrease. Speaking shows a decline in 2012 of 88.4 to 83.8 in 2014. This is another standard that needs to be addressed. Similarly, in math, you can see that I have broken down the hand-in-hand math domain into the standards. On this graph, you do not see 2011 and 12 because we were using different standards at the time. As you can see, the students at hand-in-hand have made gains in counting and cardinality. They are up to 85.1% from 81.9%. And now operations and algebraic thinking are up from 71.2% to 76.2%. However, the students lost a few points in measurement and data and geometry, but they are still really good scores. Now we'll drill down even further and look at the elements in reading. Because reading was hand-in-hand's lowest score in the language domain, these elements include reading emergent readers, reading high-frequency words, and pronouncing initial, medial, and final sounds in words. Although hand-in-hand has made gains in all of these areas, 2 of them are still very low. Only 65.7% of the students are reading high-frequency words, and 67.3% are reading emergent text with understanding. Now in math, in looking at the elements, again we do not have scores for 2011 and 12. In math elements, you can see we have gains in counting and representing a number of objects with a numeral. However, you can see that in groups that are greater or less than, that the students actually went down from 90.2 to 87.5 this year. Addition and subtraction essentially stayed the same. Only 0.3% there. So now I have provided a pie chart to show you the total number of students at Hand in Hand for the last 3 years. And as you can see, our numbers have steadily increased. Those increases show that our African American population has made some significant jumps there, but our white population has actually decreased, and our Hispanic population has almost doubled, going from 7% in 2011 to 15% in 2013-14. In math, I focused on 2 of Hand in Hand's weakest scores and broke them down by ethnicity. Looking at 2013, in counting to 100, the white students were outperforming the African American students by 11.5%. And students with disabilities are even further. In addition and subtraction, the gap between the white students and African American students is greater, with white students scoring 16% higher. However, students with disabilities are scoring comparable to the African American students. These 2 standards surely need to be addressed. The encouraging news is that by 2014, African American students have made great gains in counting to 100 and are scoring within 7% of the white students, as opposed to the 11.5% they did the year before. In addition and subtraction, white students continue to outperform African American students and students with disability. Focus on this skill probably should remain for the following year. In language arts, I wanted to focus on emergent readers, and this graph for emergent readers shows how each subgroup was performing in 2013 and 14. In 2013, both white students and African American students were scoring in a close range, with just a 6.6 of white students scoring higher. However, in 2014, white students are scoring about 10% higher than African American students, and 38.9% more than students with disabilities. Additionally, African American students have essentially remained the same for the last 2 years, so this is an area of concern. Another language standard that I wanted to focus on was sight word fluency. 70.6% of white students met this goal, while 61.3% of the African Americans did. However, both of these groups made great gains over the last 2 years. You can see that they have really pulled their scores up from what they were 2 years ago. The students with disability, though, actually lost 7% in 2014. Sight word fluency is another area that should remain as one of our needs improvements. So what are our goals for Hand in Hand for next school year? Although the students in Hand in Hand perform better than those of the state in many areas of math, the focus should remain on the element of addition and subtraction. And in language arts, they should continue to focus on reading emergent readers and sight word fluency, as both of those skills work hand in hand together. Why do all this data collection? Collecting data is like reading a road map for a trip. This data showed where Hand in Hand's strengths and weaknesses are, and consequently we now know where to begin to make changes in instruction for students. There are no shortcuts to digging into the data. However, there can be great rewards for students and schools. What we now need to do, we need to work in collaborative groups on the weak areas mentioned. We need to look at other sources besides just the GKIDS data. And we need to challenge our assumptions about why, and then triangulate all of our sources together.